Welcome, Chris, to the IoT For All Podcast. Thanks for being here this week.
Thank you, Ryan. Glad to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's start off by having you tell us a little bit about your background, your experience, kind of who you are, and the company that you're with.
I've been in the tech industry for almost 30 years now. Software engineer by trade, worked in many different markets and sectors from, finance to, the movies. And as my career progressed, I started to get closer and closer to the market and our customers, which brought me along to being more of a role line, like big business development, sales, solution architect. And what really helps me is I'm able to bring a lot of that technical background and marry that with the business side. So I'm able to talk to customers at all levels, understand their pain points, and translate that to the technical team and make sure that we're building the right product for them, solution for them. And, and I can have those hard conversations with the tech team because, I've been there and I'm still, technically inclined. So
That's actually a good thing I wanted to ask you, just thinking about your experience and background. I mean, I'm sure you've seen tons of different things and on the positive and negative side in your career. How have those experiences kind of shaped the approach that you've taken to leadership, innovation, engaging with the people you work with, all that kind of stuff?
I was lucky enough, if you want to call it that I mostly worked in startups. A lot of people will say that it's dynamic environment. I say it's mostly chaotic. But, from one day I could be debugging firmware code and the next day I'm working on the business plan with president. So early on, I kind of got the big picture of what makes a company successful from, internal resources, the people, technology, whatever it is. Mm. And so I've always had that mindset, being very pragmatic, being very honest, transparent. I always, it's about the team and the people. Project never fails because of the technology, you know, misalignment, bad focus, bad leadership, bad apples in the team. So and that's the approach I bring when I'm talking to a customer or a partner. I'm a people first person, and the company I'm working with is a people first company as well. So our priorities are really there for our customer. And, we're only as good as how happy our customers are and the products we deliver for them.
So one of the first topics I really wanted to ask you about was this kind of idea of a partnership economy. It's something that we've talked about before over the years. I mean, it's just talking about the importance of partnerships in IoT. It's something that I think as people get further into working in the IoT space, deploying solutions, building solutions, they realize how important it is. So, from your perspective and your experience, why do you believe that focusing on a company focusing on kind of what they're really good at as opposed to trying to do it all themselves and really embracing partnerships is a more sustainable approach?
It crosses over from either your tech company or not. You always have to ask yourself the question, is this my core? Is this core to my business? And if the answer is no, then you got to be careful because you don't want to become a tech company by accident. If you know what your core is, where you bring value, and then realize you need X, Y, and Z to get where you want to go, then you have to decide, well, maybe we should build it ourselves. And that mindset comes a lot from an engineering point of view where you want to have control. Bringing in outside help is always scary because, these people are not really accountable. The internal teams might be unhappy because, oh, you're bringing some expert, paying them bucks and, then they'll just dump it all on us and they'll be gone and we're responsible for it. So, and, I've seen a lot of consultants and I've lived that experience, but if you find a right partner who values what you're doing and understands what you're doing and wants to help you get there, then you get a win-win situation. Talk about IoT. Now that is a whole different beast in itself. You need expertise in so many domains: hardware, electronics, firmware, cloud, connectivity, the whole gamut. And so to try to have all that expertise in-house, unless the core of your business is to do this, you're probably missing the mark and you're not bringing value where you should be.
Do you have any, I guess, examples you can talk to of maybe companies who have either one tried to do it all and not been successful, or maybe benefited by leaning into partnerships rather than trying to do everything in house? Because there is a temptation there at times for companies to want to do it all, right? They want to have control over it. That's maybe how they envision they'll make more money, but that's doesn't seem to always be the case.
No, because what people look at is the short-term cost of it. Oh, bringing in consultants or buying it. I mean, all the costs as opposed to doing it ourselves. Because, we got some developers. Oh, let's just hire some developers. But the long-term cost and maintenance is is going to be a nightmare for you. So you really have to think this out. One example is I had is I was hired as a senior Java developer at the company. Lo and behold, when I got there, I was told, okay, we need to fix this. All the developers have left and we haven't been able to deploy a bug fix or a new release in over a year because nobody understands the code base and how it work. Can't get pilot. These guys had recreated everything from build tools, deployment tools to, uh, microservices frameworks and everything just because they could. And so it took me a couple of months to figure it out and slowly replace those pieces with open source frameworks. You realize that, engineers, they love, yeah, well, we can do it. Let's do it. Let's make it cooler. That creates a huge problem with business and the salespeople. Developers are like, hey, let's make it cooler. Sales guys are like, well, let's sell it now, buddy. I mean, like, who do you think is paying your salary? We need, so, and I've realized a lot of people, they don't even understand. I remember I had a conversation with one of the head developers, and we were talking because we're missing components, and if we couldn't source components from a different provider, different vendor, we'd have problems manufacturing units. And this guy was saying, what's the worst that can happen if we can't sell units? Um, but you update your resume, buddy. I mean, it's like, so I realized there's a huge gap there. And that is going back to my wealth of skill sets. That is something I bring when talking with developers so that they understand the business side as well, that they're not isolated. Another example is and this was actually a tech company who were manufacturing telematic devices, but they were doing it all in house, the hardware and the firmware and the design. And yes, the advantage is that you control your cost. So it was their bill of material, and they could tweak it as they see fit. But then they realized, well, what if we purchase the unit from someone else so we can focus more on our customer base? And there was a lot of clash internally, but then we realized that not only we did save on money, and so that transition, although bumpy, ended up, being the right thing to do.
This kind of leads into another piece of the kind of this, I guess, conundrum companies have at times, which is build versus buy. So it's not just about, should we do everything in house in a sense of like, should we do the hardware, should we do the software, should we do the connected, should everything be under our control versus partnerships? If you just take one of those pieces out at times, like let's say, on the software side or even the hardware side, should a company focus on building something themselves or looking into the market of something that already exists and finding a way to utilize that? Oftentimes quite polarizing when you talk to companies about which option you should take. And I know it depends, but what factors should companies consider when making this decision?
I always ask the same question. Is it core? Is it because a lot of companies believe that their needs are so unique that nothing off the shelf can address that, which is not always true. But if all those things are true, then you've just answered the question of why you should be looking at building it yourself. Rarely happens because, especially this day and age, just about everything has been done already. And so then the question becomes not only about partnering because it exists, but you're relying on that experience of that partner. They've done it before. They've seen all the hurdles from the beginning, and now they have a very polished, finished product for you to use. So, it and just thinking about connectivity, man, that is a nightmare in itself. So, as a company who's shipping something that needs to be connected, now you're thinking, oh, well, okay, well, then I need to talk with AT&T, T-Mobile. Okay, what happens if it crosses the border? Do I need the roaming? How does that figure out? Am I using plastic SIM? Oh no, I want a embedded SIM. Plastic SIM will bend in the summer if it's too hot. And is it industrial grade? So working with somebody whose their core is supplying connectivity, then you can sleep better at night because you don't have to bother with that.
It's somewhat related to companies who started in IoT when I got into the industry about 8 years ago, and they built this horizontal platform that can do everything, right? And then as things evolved, people were like, wait, in order for us to really sell this, we actually need to be a little bit more vertical specific to help solve real business problems for industries, because that's how the buyers better understand it. Kind of interesting to think about how all of that has changed. People now, there's still obviously some that will decide to do things that maybe is not the most optimal for them. Are there like warning signs that maybe if a company has a desire to maybe build everything internally, is there like something a company can be on the lookout for, of like when they might notice like this might not be the right decision for us, or we may be setting ourselves up for failure down the road? Is that something you can kind of tell early enough and get and change and pivot, or is it kind of like once you go down that road, it's hard to come back from it?
It's usually hard to come back from it because it's usually a decision taken at the top. I've seen this happen most often when the founder of the company is an engineer himself. And so it's all about the tech. The people in the business come second. If we make money out of it, hey, all the better. So it's very hard to, have that conversation with these people because they truly believe that this is the only way to make it until they fail. And then they did it, they don't understand. And then you try to figure it out. Some of the science is just like, if your R&D team is bigger than the rest of the company and you're not a tech company, then you have an issue. If my company is building commercial fryers and I all of a sudden want those fryers to be smart, so I don't have to send maintenance when they break down, but I start beefing up an R&D team to do this. Well, I mean, dude, what are you exactly? And what the joke I like to make is you're becoming a tech company by accident. So why not partner with somebody who understands that part of it? So it's your product. You know your fryer, you know your commercial fryer, you know your customers, you know your market. We know this. We'll help you bring it to the next step.
Have you ever been in a situation where, let's say, a tech stack was built internally in house, and then maybe the team itself or the team that evolved into it eventually didn't really have the knowledge or understanding or capacity to maintain it? And if so, what is that? Why is that? Like, I guess what can be done there, if anything?
There's a saying that says if you have somebody on your team that you deem indispensable, irreplaceable, get rid of them right away. Because if that person gets hit by a bus tomorrow, then you're doomed, right? And that is one of the biggest downfall of reinventing the wheel about everything. The learning curve for new employees just got that much bigger because not only do they have to learn, the product itself and what you're building for your customers and the requirements and the features, now have to learn, oh, we're not using Maven to do this. We're using your custom tool. Oh, we're not using Spring as an internal framework for this. Oh, we're building your own. Okay. You're not using this for documentation, so you recognize frameworks, products, tools, libraries, that have a community behind them, that are solid, that proven themselves. Use it, just use it.
Striking a balance between the technical oversight a leadership needs to have, and operational kind of autonomy when it comes to building any of these types of technologies or solutions. How do you view that? And how do you like think about that, I guess?
A lot of it has to do with the opportunity in front of you, building something, like we have daily meetings between operations and sales and operations slash devs so that everybody aligns themselves. And if there's new opportunities, you get a chance to talk about it because, resources are limited and you need to have the awareness of people's time. But at the same time, you need to inform these guys of, if you're a salesperson, you're the voice of the customer in the market. You know what's happening out there. Everybody's Steve Jobs and knows, the perfect product to develop. So you rely on these folks that are close to the market that are bringing you requirements and then evaluate the opportunity. And you need to be the voice of the customer and then negotiate that at the table. Your R&D. We're not even talking yet about if we need to build or buy at that point. We're just talking about opportunity, that vision of not only looking out, but looking in. And by having those conversations, what happens is you start to build trust and the guys will be like, oh, Chris has brought us something to the table. We better sit down and listen to him because he knows what he's talking about. And that's where a lot of my tech background comes in. So I'm able to have those conversations with those guys in a meeting where you ask a question that might be a bit more technical and the person says, well, I'll get back to you because, they don't know the answer or they didn't bring back what they need to do it. And you kind of lose momentum there. So by me being able to be, well-rounded, technical, business, commercial, I'm able to have this conversation and them guys appreciate it because, they'll be like, well, they talk about the specs for this and that. It's like, yeah, actually we did. And this is, okay. 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 That's cool. And then we move on.
Are there any use cases that stand out to you as maybe memorable or unusual that you've encountered that kind of help talk to some of the challenges and things in the build versus buy argument, or maybe like the importance of partnership conversation that we started this conversation around? Is anything that can kind of maybe showcase it in the real world from like your experience?
I've had bad experience of working with companies where we wanted to do everything, started doing everything, and slowly realized we were imploding because we just couldn't deal with it. It's problems, not just the upfront cost of developing it. Got to maintain it. That means you need a team of experts at every level. So, you know, instead of hosting with Amazon or Google or whatever, we had our own on-premise cloud infrastructure. So that means now you need some IP network rules just to manage all the routers, all the different layers, the firewall security, the redundancy. You need to go on site. I need to buy new racks, new servers. Oh, there's a flood, there's a fire or something. And, realize it just makes no sense. If we were a cloud provider, sure. Are we a cloud provider? No. So why are we supporting our own cloud? Doesn't make sense. And I realize oftentimes, that hindsight is 2020. And when you're looking at it, you're talking, you brainstorm. We should do this. We should do that. And yes, yes, yes. And sometimes it is required to build. I think the process should be: is there something on the market that we can use right now as a first version, just to like put things together so we understand, we see what this looks like. Let's have a first iteration that we can play with or send out there, and then evaluate as we move forward. Okay, and build it in such a way that we can interchange this part. So let's say the product we're building will require some sort of video conferencing. Do you want to build your own? Well, maybe ultimately you do, because you need compliancy and security that is beyond what is available, or you need recording capabilities that goes beyond what typical platforms do. But maybe version one, we can use Google Meet or Teams or whatever, use their API to build it, because our core business is not selling a teleconference platform, but we need one. So, it's eyeballing those things and knowing what you can reuse, customize versus build. And then there's the build versus buy versus partner, because sometimes you can buy it off the shelf, but you still need to understand it. You need some integration with it. So sometimes, finding somebody who's an expert at that, who's done it before, is the best place to go. Because the thing is, experience is worth a lot. And a company that has done this multiple times, they know what to expect. They know the bumps down the road that you may not have, thought about. And so they'll bring you to where you need to go faster.
One thing I definitely want to ask you before we kind of get towards the end and wrap up. You mentioned this in kind of the pre-show notes. You had this talking about the mob and a murder case and something. So you mentioned it. It wasn't expanded on, but like I have to ask you, like what without like giving too much away. Is there like what can you share about that? Because I've never had anyone leave a note like that in their pre-show notes to where I'm like I feel like I have to dive in here for a second, just be like what is going on?
Well, I'll change names to save the innocents, including myself. But I've been working in IoT telematics for the last 15 years. So some of our products were sent out to the market, and of course they're out there. And chances are they might be used for bad and rather than good. And so in my years, I've had many interactions with law enforcement, because usually it's for a stolen car. They say, "Oh, car was stolen, and we found out that one of your units was, installed on it. Can you help us track it? Or the last time you've seen it," stuff like that. This one time, get a call from the DA's office investigating a murder. The person who was deceased was in a rental car equipped with one of our telematics devices, and so they asked me, "Can you tell us who was operating the system, from where, and what kind of interaction they did with the unit?" And so I was able to figure out the user, but these companies, they create one username and every employee uses it. They're not tech savvy people. But on the day of the murder, you could see that the unit was being pinged every 10 seconds. My guess is whoever was operating the system was relaying that information to somebody on site and was following them. once the car stopped, I gave them as much information as I could, which wasn't a lot, but me being the investigator in me started digging into the system and going through like the archives, the web. So what the web looked like in 1992, and you get all these old forums and whatnot. And I was using that username and email, and I was able to match it to someone on a forum selling car parts. And I had a phone number and a name. So I started digging into that. I found an article that this individual used to be a mob enforcer, turned state's evidence for a lesser sentence, but was still obviously doing bad stuff. So now I give all this information to the DA, and the DA is like, Chris, we need an expert witness. Can you come down to Atlanta and testify? I'm like, they're like, come on, Chris, it's not that dangerous. I won't say the faction of the mafia is, they're not known for playing nice. My boss was pressuring me to go because he was trying to strike a deal with the DA for help on a separate issue. And I'm like, dude, I am not going. You're the president, you're the founder, you're an engineer, you go. So he went, and this is just to show how safe it was. He was escorted by U.S. Marshals the whole time, airport to hotel to courtroom and back. It was so safe that he's about to get to his hotel room. He swipes his card, about to go in. This big marshal guy puts his hand on there. No, sir. They have to do an all clear of the room before, okay, it's safe. You can go in. Like, yeah, no. He was sweating bullets on the stand, but there's no way I was going down there. My wife, when she was younger, was a bartender in a bar run by the Irish mob. Not to say this was the Irish mob, but we know a thing or two about how these guys operate. And so, yeah, that's a little scary. But when I found out and I saw the picture of the dude, like, oh my God, guys, like, he looks like out of a movie.
Let's say we look ahead 2, 3, 4, 5+ years out. What do you think are the trends and the challenges that will really kind of resonate and be focused on for the IoT industry? I mean, obviously, there's been so many over the years, but you've navigated away from some have amplified. But what do you think continues on? What do you think kind of evolves out of the growth of AI and all the stuff that we've been talking about?
One of the big ones, and it has been addressed to a certain degree, but I find not enough, is the security aspect of it. Won't be too long and everything. So that means everything's got an IP address, public IP address, no less. And so, hacking your car, hacking your devices, so having a secure platform is absolutely important. And like I said, some of it has been addressed, but mostly tools have been provided, right? It's still up to whoever's developing the solution to make sure they're following the proper procedures to ensure that space is going to be starting to be a concern as well, because a lot of data is being collected, and the cost associated with that as well. The other thing that I find a little scary when working with, we're talking about partnerships. Fine, I wouldn't consider like Google or Amazon or Microsoft a partner that should using their platform. They're more of a provider, but you also got to be careful because, like not too long ago, Google pulled their services for a certain subset functionality for IoT. So if you're relying on that, you're like, what the hell, Google?
The thing, at least from our experience, what we saw with Google when IoT Core was deprecated, is they did make an internal effort to really try and get their partners who were IoT Core partners involved to take over those relationships. But you're right. I mean, any type of technology that you use, you really want to understand it and make sure that it has, that longevity, because same with like connectivity and all those kinds of things, is if it stops being supported, then your deployment is going to kind of be the thing that suffers. Same with the companies you choose to work with, right? If the company goes under and is no longer there to support the software, support the deployment, what are you supposed to do? Choosing the right company, the partnership, that's all very important. Last thing I would ask you before we wrap up is, for everyone listening, there's obviously been a lot of different topics we've touched on. What would be the main takeaways, I guess, pieces of advice you have for companies that are grappling with the whole build versus buy decision, when they're grappling with doing it all in-house versus, relying on partnerships? What would you tell them to really, like, how they should really have a frame of mind going into the decision-making process?
Have a good conversation with somebody outside your company. Maybe ultimately the decision will be to do everything in-house, but at least have a conversation with somebody, with a potential partner who can, maybe enlighten you on certain topics, maybe tell you stuff you didn't even think about. And, sometimes the outcome is hybrid, you know, build what's critical, use standard tools and partner for, the expertise. It's always a combination, unless of course you're like my example before, you look at a commercial fryer manufacturer and, there's really no room for engineering in IoT there. So you really need to find yourself a partner. But if you're more tech oriented, you may realize, yeah, we need to build some stuff internally. And maybe your partner can help you build that as well. If you partner with somebody who ultimately the end product is yours, the IP is yours, So when somebody comes to me and they need help to build whatever, usually the product ends up being theirs. It's their IP, their product. We help you build it. We'll be a first line of support for you. We'll be there, we'll be your silent partner. We'll be your R&D partner, whatever. But, so combination of all those things. And it's important to have those conversations because sometimes it's easy to believe that, the only way to go is to do it all. That's why, that's why a few years ago, you saw a whole bunch of companies becoming MVNOs. It was a trend. Everybody was their own provider because, they believed that controlling that connectivity was a key and good marketing because, hey, we can do it all. We ship product anywhere on the planet and all will work. Yeah, except you also have the headache of when 2G goes away, 3G goes away, and you're like, oh my God, I got millions of units out there and they're not talking and everybody's going to be calling me. My fault. It's my responsibility. I can't blame anyone else.
Chris, thank you so much for doing this. This has been a fantastic conversation. Really appreciate the time. And if our audience wants to follow up or learn more about what you have going on, what's the best way they can do that?
The yellow pages. Just you can find me on LinkedIn. I don't do social media really, but although the company does, but they can find me on LinkedIn. My name's down there. Company's Amotus.
Cool. Well, we'll make sure we link all that up. And yeah, thank you again for your time.
Thank you for your time, Ryan.